Welcome to Beauty and Wellbeing, Longevity and Vitality by DrSouphi. Today we have the pleasure of speaking with Leslie Kenny, the inspiring founder of Oxford Healthspan. Leslie, your story is a story of empowerment, a story of not giving our power away and empowering ourselves with knowledge, but also actions that we can incorporate into our daily life for our well-being and vitality. I'd love to hear your story, please.
Well, thank you so much, first of all, for inviting me to be on your podcast.
It's a pleasure having you. Thank you for accepting our invitation.
Of course. And I hope that by sharing my story, I will give hope to other patients out there who've been given dire diagnoses and told there's nothing they can do about their conditions. So just to share with your listeners a little bit about myself, when I was 39 years old and was in the middle of IVF treatment, I was beginning to feel some symptoms of what I thought felt like arthritis. But because I was only 39, I was sure I couldn't have arthritis. So I went to my doctor and said, please, can we just do some tests? I'm not feeling quite right. I can't turn faucets. I can't turn doorknobs. I am having trouble typing on my keyboard. And she ran the test and I got the call back that no one wants, which is from their doctor rather than from the receptionist. And instead of telling me what my results were, she asked me to come in to have a talk.
Oh dear.
And exactly. You've probably been on the other end of that conversation. And I went in and she said, well, you were right. You do indeed have arthritis. It's rheumatoid arthritis. And here are the drugs we're going to give you because your immune system looks like it's fighting cancer, but instead what it's doing is destroying your own tissue. Right. So I got the diagnosis of rheumatoid arthritis from my doctor, and she handed me a box of syringes that were pre-filled with immune suppressants and said, we need to basically drag your immune system back down. It's too strong. And I did think this was strange because don't we want a strong immune system? Isn't this good? And she said, in this case, it's not because it looks like your body is fighting cancer, but instead it's using all of that power. It's like friendly fire. You're attacking your own tissues. So I thought, okay, well, I have these immune suppressants. Anything else? And she said, well, you have to avoid all social situations where there are lots of people. And in particular, avoid children because they carry lots of viruses. And I thought, well, that's not ideal because I am doing my 5th IVF. I'm even going to the trouble of organizing donor eggs because my eggs, I was told, were not good enough. And I thought, okay, well, that's fine. Great. And then she said, but there's something else. You have lupus. And I said, okay, I don't know what that is, but what are the drugs for that? And she said, unfortunately, we have no drugs for that. And there is no cure. And I said, are you sure there's nothing I can do to help? Like my diet, my lifestyle? And she said, no, there's nothing you can do. And I said, but this is really inconvenient. My 5th IVF cycle, I've spent over $100,000 trying to get pregnant. Do you know how hard it is to find half Asian, half Caucasian donor of eggs? It's really difficult. Doc, you have to fix this. And she just looked at me and she said, don't even bother with this cycle. You have a good 5 years left. There is no point. And what she was telling me was there was no point in having children because I would leave a child, if I was able to conceive, motherless. Okay. And that's a pretty big blow because for me, these diseases were off to the sideline. What I wanted was a baby.
And you were only 39 at the time.
I was 39, exactly. And I was shocked by what she told me. I simply had no comeback for that. I had asked if possibly the test results were wrong. She'd said no. I said, could I take the test again? And she said, yes, I could. It was my insurance. So fine, I could come back within 6 months. So I resolved to leave her office and do everything I possibly could to try to improve my health in some way, to at least meet her halfway. Maybe with the help of these rheumatoid arthritis drugs, maybe if I slept better, I ate better, felt better, maybe by some miracle, I would be able to beat this thing. And we patients do have a choice. We can either engage or we can disengage. And it's, if you become passive, it's an acceptance of your fate. And think that the survival instinct was just so strong in me, and I think it is in many people, that I had this huge desire to do whatever I could. But of course, she said there was nothing I could do.
Right.
So it was up to me to try to find answers. And I know that doctors have limits to what they can say to patients. No doctor wants to give false hope to a patient. And I'm sure you have been in that situation before. You don't want to mislead with false promises. I thought if I went to a patient forum, perhaps I would find other patients who had beaten this disease of lupus. And I only needed one person who had been successful for me to have hope, because that showed that this disease could be beat.
Right.
So I was on those patient forums. I did indeed find people who had beat lupus, and I was told about a very novel therapy called intravenous immunoglobulin, or IVIG. It's still offered today, and it's a transfusion of lots of plasma from other patients. And at the time, there were some small clinical trials of this. So I managed to get a different doctor to prescribe it to me. I did 2 rounds of that, and they were about 24,000 US dollars in total, so 12,000 each. And at the same time, I looked at the root causes of these autoimmune diseases and realized that inflammation was at the root of both of them. And that I really needed to do everything I could to tamp down the inflammation. So I went on anti-inflammatory diet. I was taking lots of high-dose omega-3 fatty acids, lots of olive oil. I was removing anything that might trigger my immune system, such as gluten. Even tomatoes for me are a little bit difficult because of the lectin content. I took out dairy. And what I was hoping with the intravenous immunoglobulin, or the IVIG, was that it would reset my system, my immune system. And by removing the triggers to my immune system, I would be good. So that was the philosophy. And the overarching idea for me, especially being half Taiwanese, was that the body be brought back into balance. I didn't like and couldn't accept the idea of suppressing my immune system, because for me, fundamentally, it's much better to bring the body back into a place of perfect, optimum balance. And when it's in harmony like that, from that place of harmony and balance, there is no friction. And the body has this innate wisdom. It knows how to heal itself, how to be at its optimum best, but we must give it the things that it needs to stay at that balance point. And that was my overarching goal. So I went back 6 months later, and it was for a checkup.
So you didn't take any medications?
No, I started with the immune suppressants, and I must say, I really didn't like them. I had to do visualizations to kind of accept them. Every time I put them in, I just kept hitting a blood vessel, kept getting horrible bruises. And it's, even though they're tiny diabetic needles, there's something about it that just felt wrong to me. And it felt like I know this is going to sound wrong, and I know that there are many autoimmune patients for whom these drugs do offer hope, but for me, it felt violent. It felt fundamentally wrong. And I had great difficulty accepting it because of this philosophy of wanting to bring the body into balance, and also wanting to allow my body to do what I felt it could do. if I could bring it back to that balance point, it knew better how to drive itself than I knew how to do it. So that was the goal.
Just at this point say that in these podcasts, we do not offer any medical advice. So we discuss our journeys, we discuss our experiences in life. And for anybody going through their different health conditions, it's important for them to consult with their healthcare professionals and find their own life journey and what they'd like to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is just simply what worked for me.
Exactly.
And so the doctor, I'm sitting back in her office within 6 months of my original diagnoses, and also Hashimoto's thyroiditis had been part of this too.
So three different autoimmune diseases.
Three different, and those three tend to come together. People who have one of them tend to get the others.
Rheumatoid arthritis,
Hashimoto's, and
lupus.
Lupus, correct.
At the age of 39, while you're trying for a baby.
Yeah, not ideal timing, I must say.
Bless you.
It was really difficult. I look back now and I have a lot of compassion for myself and admiration for not having rolled over, right? For not having accepted that diagnosis. And the doctor opened the file and said, well, look at that. You don't have lupus or RA anymore. And I was just like, what? And that's when the penny dropped. And that's when I realized that no matter how many certificates a doctor has, and I have certificates too, but there's no one person who can know all things. And we patients, it is absolutely incumbent upon us to help our doctors, to meet them halfway by engaging in our healthcare journey, by taking responsibility where we can. And that includes things like listening to when our body is giving us messages, which it does 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all our lives. We know when we feel poorly. We know if our stomach hurts, if our leg hurts, if our head hurts. The doctor cannot know these things. These are data points that we have, and we can take notice of them and do things about them. We also control what we put in our mouths, what we put also in our minds, right? Yeah. There are things that we need to nourish our bodies and our minds, and there are toxins that can go in here, into our head, as well as into our mouth, and we have got to be very good about curating those things that we allow in. And then there's movement and social connection and sleep.
Absolutely.
And mitigating stress, of course. Those are the things that I think are the easiest places to make a big impact. So
truly inspiring.
Thank you.
Truly inspiring.
Thank you.
And how was it for you? And you never went back?
No, I never went back. And I know that my drugs cost $5,000 a month back in 2004. And my insurance company paid for that. If I had stayed on those drugs and the price had stayed the same, $5,000, my insurance company would have spent over $1.1 million at this point, had I stayed alive. Now, they said I would be dead within 5 years. So maybe that was how they made the calculation. But either way, if you think about the $24,000 that I spent, the changes to diet and lifestyle I implemented, that also included quitting my job, by the way. Not everyone is in the fortunate position to do that. Then, I think that the cost-benefit analysis clearly shows that finding a way to cure the body is a better outcome for the patient, but it's a better economic benefit to the insurer as well.
But also you're healthy, happy, and thriving, and you've got your very successful company. You've not had to take any medications, and you're healthy and happy, and that's important. I think this brings to my attention that a lot of us, I'd like to say majority of us, have become very numb. And what we do day to day, we don't pay attention to our body. We don't pay attention to our emotions. We don't pay attention to our well-being. So we don't sleep well. We try to sleep as late as possible, wake up early because we have to go to work. We eat whatever we can get our hands on, quick lunch here and there. We've forgotten how to take care of our body. And it's like a car, isn't it? If you don't put water inside the car, oil inside the car, take it for MOT and take care of it, eventually it gives up. And then we go to somebody and say, fix me now, or fix the car now. But they can do whatever they've been trained to do. But if you don't take care of your body yourself and still don't sleep well, don't eat well, don't exercise, all the right things we should do, it'll never get better.
Exactly. I think that's precisely it. It's really not fair of us to go to our medical professionals when basically the car is a write-off, right?
Right.
The need for repair is so great. We need to continually maintain ourselves. And that's ideas like cell renewal are so interesting to me, because
Absolutely.
it is part of that maintenance, that regular maintenance practice that we all need to engage in. And I must say, I am very lucky in that, having had such a great health shock at age 39, 20 years later, now at age 59, I've not only had my baby naturally, well, I adopted a little girl from China first, and then 3 years later, completely unpredicted, had a
How
baby
wonderful.
naturally at age 43. I'm now
How
59.
wonderful.
It is
Congratulations.
wonderful. Exactly. The body is miraculous, right?
It indeed
And
is.
when
Yes.
it is healthy enough to bring another human into this planet, then it will.
Absolutely.
So, but now at age 59, I've done my glycan age biological age test. And that looks at the immune system, it looks at inflammation, it looks at a lot of other markers, but a lot of them are around inflammation. And that's what I'm primarily concerned with as an autoimmune patient.
Sure.
And my,
How wonderful is that? That's amazing. I'm so sorry. You probably can hear my dog. I'm gonna go
no,
and get her, bring her next to me because she's really upset.
that's
One
okay.
second.
Sure.
This is
Oh,
Minnie.
oh,
She's been really
Minnie's so
upset, so
cute.
there we go. I'm gonna put her next
Oh,
to me.
she's so sweet. She's so cute.
Thank you. And you were saying that your actual biological age is 21.
Yes, that is. That's astonishing to me. Minnie thinks it's astonishing too. I'm glad your dog is excited for me as well. And what also is interesting was that the actress and former Bond girl Halle Berry did this exact same test. She has type 1 diabetes. That's the diabetes that you're born with.
Yes.
So another autoimmune condition. She took it at age 57. And her biological age came back, I think, at 37 or 39, which she thought was great. But I thought, how is it possible that I'm a year older and my biological age is so much younger than someone like her, who she's obviously in great physical shape and has access to some of the world's best doctors. So it's amazing to see what you can do on your own, right? You don't
Absolutely.
need to be a Hollywood starlet to get a great outcome, but you do need to empower yourself, and you need to be proactive, and you need to take personal responsibility and make changes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's an exciting time to be alive. We have
It
so
is.
much information at our fingertips for free, and we have to take that responsibility for our health, for our well-being, and for thriving. Leslie, congratulations on everything you have done. Your story is
Thank you.
truly inspiring.
Thank you.
Please tell us exactly what you're doing. Not that it will apply to every single person out there, but it is a very good framework to go back to.
You mean the things I'm doing for my own health?
That's right.
Well, about every 6 months, I see an endocrinologist who is trained in functional medicine, but who also is board certified in endocrinology and as a general practitioner. And I run a whole series of blood panels. Every year, I test my cytokines and tumor necrosis factor alpha and IL-6 just to check where my inflammatory markers are as an autoimmune patient. And I'm really also looking very carefully at my thyroid, because
Right.
unfortunately, though we have stopped the rheumatoid arthritis and we stopped the lupus, the Hashimoto's thyroiditis had basically destroyed about 7/8 of my thyroid. So I don't have much of a thyroid left. And I'm taking something called Armour Thyroid. You can get Armour, you can get IRF. It's not in the British physician's desk reference. It used to be. It was used in this country for 50 years until levothyroxine, synthetic thyroid hormone, became the standard protocol here. So I'm on the same thing that Hillary Clinton is on. This is part of the American protocol. About a third of American thyroid patients are on this. And it is desiccated pig's thyroid. So it contains all of the thyroid hormones that we make as well. And that is not just T4, which correlates to synthetic levothyroxine, synthetic thyroid, but T3, which is what every cell in our body has a receptor for T3. That's the bioavailable thyroid hormone. And it also has T0. T2 does have something to do with metabolism. So I take that. I feel great on it. And I'm always checking that. I'm always checking my pulse to make sure it's not too high, not too low. I'm checking my body temperature. These are kind of classic clinical symptoms of thyroid dysregulation. And that's something that the doctor who diagnosed my thyroid, we knew about the Hashimoto's, but this is somebody who said, you really need to get this treated. He was the one who sort of taught me how to notice these clinical symptoms of dysregulated thyroid. So I do those things. I also a pretty clean eater. I avoid gluten because it doesn't like me. Even though when I go to France, I see the croissants, I might have one, but I always pay the price later. Yes, I have to be careful with dairy unless it's very heavy cream, because I seem to be allergic to the casein protein. And I also avoid tomatoes just because of, again, the lectins. I always get little flare-ups if I overdo it with tomatoes. Sleep, I try to get good sleep. I do have a wearable tracking ring, an Aura ring, to look at that. And then I have a host of supplements that I take. And I also do regular movement to maintain muscle. I do something that's popular in Japan called the Katsu bands. They're blood restriction bands, and they go on your arms. A lot of the Olympians that we see in Paris right now are using them. And basically, they trap nitric oxide and lactic acid in your limb for just 30 seconds, and then they release. And they do this about 6 times. And when you release, there's a surge of that nitric oxide and lactic acid that hits the pituitary gland and tells that gland that you have been lifting a heavy weight and the tissue has been destroyed, and that your body needs to manufacture growth hormone. And so what then happens, so it's a bit of a trick with the body, because our body is like a little pharmacy. We tell our bodies, make more growth hormone. That growth hormone is then sent to, say, the arm, where there's actually nothing to repair. So it's used to build muscle. So I don't go to the gym, but you can see I'm okay when it comes to muscle here. And it's just a really nice little hack. I love it. The research is very robust out of the University of Tokyo. And it's even used in their hospitals. It can rebuild muscle even in those over the age of 100, which is very hard to do.
Very interesting. We should do an episode on that for sure.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So those are some of the things I do. And of course, I'm very interested in activating this maintenance process in my body that I talked about, which is called autophagy. Right. Some people call it autophagy. They're both correct, like tomato or tomato. And it's an amazing process of cell renewal and recycling, and is very important for fast growing areas, for fast cell turnover areas like the lining of the gut, which replaces itself every 3 to 5 days. But it's also very important for areas that replace themselves very slowly, like the heart, where even at age 25, only 1% of our cardiomyocytes, these are the cells that regulate the rhythm of the heart, they only replace, only 1% of all those heart cells are replaced at age 25. And now by age 60, only 0.5%. So we need to maintain them. You were talking about cars and making sure the oil is topped up. It's a bit like that with these cardiomyocytes. We need to keep them in really good condition throughout our entire lifetime. We can't, replace them. They just don't replace like, say, skin cells do.
And how do you do that?
Well, I do that using a really unusually named molecule called spermidine.
Spermidine is
I
the word
know.
for today.
I know. Fortunately, this name is so terrible, and it's because it was discovered by a man. It is actually, of course, it is in high concentrations. It's found in high concentrations in seminal fluid. It is used by sperm when they are taking DNA to the egg. Normally DNA is wrapped around a very large molecule called a histone bond. That's like taking a gigantic suitcase and trying to run through the airport. Actually, the sperm actually wraps DNA around spermidine. And it's like running through the airport with a little backpack to get to the egg because it's so much tinier than a histone bond. So spermidine has a lot of purposes, but one of its big purposes is to help cells grow. And so that's why it's in very big quantities in mother's milk, in breast milk, because our bodies are there to ensure the survival of our babies. And premature babies, for instance, they have looked at the breast milk of mothers of premature babies, and they have higher concentrations of spermidine to help the babies catch up with growth. And as babies get older, they have more spermine than spermidine. It's a related molecule that helps with DNA methylation. That's when you turn good genes on and bad genes off. And so again, the miracle of the human body, we need spermidine to help the next generation be conceived, survive, and thrive and grow. But we also use it in our bodies to rejuvenate cells that do not replace themselves easily, like cardiomyocytes. We need them to clean out cellular waste and debris in things like neurons. We need it to do this in areas like the lining of the gut, where spermidine actually tightens up the junctions of the gut lining so that you don't get undigested food particles crossing through those holes in leaky gut and getting into the immune system where the body mounts an immune attack. We need spermidine to also help rejuvenate immune cells. This was some very exciting research out of the University of Oxford, and two of our scientific advisors, Professor Katja Simon and Dr. Ghada Al-Saleh, were the ones who conducted this research, where they could show that spermidine actually renews and rejuvenates older immune cells.
Interesting.
And the reason that's important is because, well, we've just seen with COVID, we need our immune system to be in tip-top condition to fight pathogens, whether they're bacteria or viruses. We need it to constantly be on the lookout for cancer. And we also need it to properly identify friend from enemy. So properly identify tissue that is our tissue, so we don't attack it like my body did with my autoimmune diseases, but instead protects it from invading pathogens like COVID. And that process of protecting against viruses is known as virophagy. So it's basically, think of spermidine as your little cleaner, and it comes in with garbage bags, and it's there to take all the rubbish out of the cell, but also it will bag up all the viruses and bacteria that shouldn't be there and clear them out for you. So there are many ways that spermidine helps us survive and maintain, just maintain our bodies in a youthful way.
Sure. Do we naturally make spermidine?
We do in our tissues and in our gut biome. We can manufacture it. And for instance, the very healthy populations of older people in longevity hotspots like Okinawa or Ikaria in Greece, these populations, these older people still make high concentrations of spermidine.
Right.
Like they were, even if they're 90, it looks like they're 50 in terms of the amount of spermidine they're making. And so we can always make it, but it depends on whether or not we have been exposed to broad spectrum antibiotics.
Right.
If we have been exposed to those, then we may have wiped out some of the populations of bacteria that can manufacture spermidine. The other thing is that we need to constantly feed those bacteria with fiber. And that's something, you've talked about how we're so busy, we just eat whatever is to hand. Well, if that's a processed food, there won't be any fiber there. So we might be feeding our stomachs, but we're not feeding the colonies of healthy bacteria in our gut biome that can make things like B vitamins, serotonin, melatonin, and spermidine. We need to always remember, be very mindful when we feed ourselves that we're feeding this colony of bacteria as well. And then I mentioned that our tissues can manufacture it, but when we're young, that's when our tissues make it the most. So a baby has the highest, when we are babies, that is when we have the highest amount of tissue-derived spermidine in our bodies in our entire life. As we get older, that tissue production goes down. So starting from age 26, the tissue production begins to stop. And obviously, postmenopausally, someone like me, my tissues are not manufacturing it anymore. I need to get it from my gut biome from my diet. And that's where, making sure we get mushrooms and fermented foods and plant material, all plant material has spermidine. That's really important.
Interesting. So we can actually get it from our food. We don't have to necessarily supplement it.
Well, we can supplement it, but food is always for me, as it's always my first port of call. And I think that we have to remember that we have co-evolved with plants, right? And they are some of the world's best chemists. They have been on the planet for 1 billion years, and they've been responding to environmental stimuli, whether that's heat or drought or cold, and they know how to combine different plant chemicals in ways that are novel and can be beneficial to us. As a matter of fact, as you probably know, many of our medications have plant roots. Usually they were initially discovered in a plant first. And so if we can get it from our food first, that is my first choice. And as I mentioned, things like mushrooms are a great source. Beans, legumes, they're a good source. Fermented foods, if you are okay with the histamine load, you're not allergic to that histamine, then that's good. Even cheese has spermidine. So anything that has been matured and fermented for a long time will have spermidine in it. You won't get spermidine in meat though, except for chicken and duck liver. Just those two. It's very strange. In terms of supplementation, there are some very discrete time points when you might want to take it. And these are life events, pregnancy, breastfeeding, where the body says, my job is to ensure the survival of the next generation. So I'm going to take this mother's spermidine and I'm going to give it to the baby so the baby grows in utero. And then once the baby is born, I need to make the baby grow quickly because it's got that giant brain and tiny body. So I've got to make it grow fast. I'm going to take all the spermidine from the mother and put it in the breast milk. That's why a lot of mothers experience hair loss and even some hair graying after they deliver their babies. It'll be that together with low thyroid that will be the perfect storm for those mothers. And life events like pregnancy and breastfeeding it would be good to top up your spermidine levels, both in your food and supplementing. And then, of course, after an infection, and COVID is the perfect example of that. About 1/3 of all COVID patients experienced hair loss. The reason why hair loss happens, the connection between spermidine and hair loss, is that spermidine keeps the hair follicle in the growth phase of its life cycle. So you have 3 distinct parts of the hair follicle life cycle: growth, resting, and shedding. And it's really growth and shedding that we're concerned with. And if you don't have enough spermidine, your hair follicle is going to immediately go into that shedding phase. And if it's in the shedding phase, it doesn't produce any hair pigment, which is why some people can get premature gray hair. So those are some times when you'd want to do it. If you had a heart attack, some kind of heart event, it would be useful to give some spermidine to help with supporting those cardiomyocytes. Again, you would always start with what your doctor is telling you to do. This is meant to be a supportive supplement. It's not meant to replace what your medical professional is telling you to do.
Does it help patients with diabetes?
So that's actually really interesting. It does seem to assist with better insulin response. And I think that there needs to be so much more research done around spermidine, because I don't want to come across as saying spermidine is great for everything, which is kind of what it sounds like. But a number of these things. So let's look at something adjacent to diabetes, which would be non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. We know that it can help reverse fibrosis with patients with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which is very surprising. And that is, these are, now again, I hasten to add, I'm speaking to you as a doctor. These are in mouse models. We are not mice, so we need to prove these things in humans. But it's extremely promising, and in many ways, I think, unexpected to see that result. It also works with alcoholic-induced fibrosis. That was a shock to me. So yes, it is probably this process of cell renewal and recycling that just allows all cells to work optimally and get rid of rubbish that, if we're eating too much sugar and there is a cascade of stress on the cells, the cell can't handle it. And if you give it a boost, if you bring in, say your house is very dirty and you bring in a couple of cleaners, that's just the boost it needs to get back on track again.
Amazing. Leslie, I'd like to go back to your conversation with regards to pregnancy and breastfeeding. And I am aware that people who go through pregnancy and they're breastfeeding, they're very cautious about what they can take or what they should take. Have there been studies with regards to efficacy and safety of spermidine supplements when it comes to pregnancy and breastfeeding?
So unfortunately, there have not been any done with those who are pregnant or breastfeeding. So I would encourage all pregnant and breastfeeding mothers to get more of this into their diet. And so again, all plant material has this. So please, please, please increase your intake of beans, legumes, broccoli, leafy greens, mushrooms. All of these things are very healthy for you. Sauerkraut, kimchi. These will benefit you and the baby and help you as you deliver and are breastfeeding, right? And we know there have been studies done on, this was fascinating work out of Spain. There have been at least 3 studies on pregnant mothers and spermidine levels, and they can see that mothers who are of normal weight have high spermidine levels in their breast milk for their babies. But mothers who are obese or overweight have low levels of spermidine in their breast milk, which means that if you want to help your baby you need to help yourself first. You
Absolutely.
need to get into as good a physical condition as you possibly can, because that allows your body, which is essentially a factory for the baby, it allows your body to make higher levels of spermidine to allow them to grow and thrive in life. One other comment I want to make about spermidine supplements is that there are two types. There are synthetic spermidine supplements and there are food-derived spermidine supplements.
Right.
And my company, Oxford Healthspan, only manufactures food-derived spermidine supplements because we have never tested synthetic spermidine in humans.
Okay.
We've only tested it in animal models, so we don't know the results. And what I will say is that there have been some drugs that have worked in animal models that have not worked in humans, and thalidomide is the biggest example of that.
Mm.
But the other thing is that when you get something from a food, you are getting it with the other co-occurring molecules that plants have decided should go together. So
Sure.
I said, plants have been here 1 billion years. They're the greatest chemists on the face of the earth. And they combine spermidine with other things. So in the case of Primidine Original, which is our wheat germ-derived spermidine, that comes together with spermine, which is also in breast milk, putrescine, also in breast milk. These three polyamines, they're just types of amino acids, are made from amino acids. These three molecules are part of a recycling loop, and they can turn into each other, which is great.
May
And,
clarify that again. So you
yeah,
talked about two different products in parallel.
yes.
And I want to make sure that our listeners get that right. So you have two different products. They have a little bit of different properties and they work a little bit differently, but they are both plant-derived and they're not
Correct.
synthetic.
Correct. So the first one, Primidine Original, is from wheat germ, Primidine, and it's called Primidine Original. And it has been created almost like breast milk. And that's because it has those three polyamines, spermidine, spermine, and putrescine together. And we have added a fructooligosaccharide, a resistant starch that is exactly what you have in breast milk. About 50% of breast milk is made up of these fructooligosaccharides. The body doesn't digest them. So when I took a course on the microbiome through the University of Colorado at Boulder, where Rob Knight, who runs the American Gut Project, is. And I was so surprised that babies take in all of this fiber. Their digestive systems are at ground zero. They are not developed at all. So they're taking in all this spermidine, they're taking in all of this fiber. Where does the fiber go? Well, the fiber goes to feed those bacterial colonies that the mother has given to the baby. Yeah, as the baby goes through the birth canal, it pushes on the cecum and it's given all those bacteria, and you've got to feed them. So what we've done with Primidine Original is we have included fructooligosaccharide to help selectively feed the healthy bacteria in the gut biome that can manufacture spermidine for you. I mean, I hate waste of any kind. And I feel like if we have a little factory that can make spermidine inside of us, we need to help that factory. And that's what the fructooligosaccharide is there for. Then with Primidine GF, which is gluten-free, that product was made because so many autoimmune patients had heard my story and said, Leslie, we want to take this product, but we can't. It's from wheat. We're allergic to lectins. And so I looked everywhere, really went everywhere, looking for a plant that had high spermidine levels and did not have lectins or anything allergenic. And I found this in a substrain of chlorella grown in the southernmost island of Okinawa. Okinawa is a chain of islands in southern Japan. This substrain, we tested over 100 different substrains to find it had very high concentrations because you need to get at least 1 milligram of food-derived spermidine to get that minimum effective dose. And we put that together with 2 other autophagy activators, 2 other cell renewal activators. One is nobilitin, And that is a molecule that's found in the peel of citrus. So bergamot, the
Interesting.
bergamot lemon has some. That's why Earl Grey tea would be good for you, might activate a little bit of autophagy. But in this Okinawan lime, it occurs in exceedingly high quantities. So we took some of that, and then we took some Okinawan autumn turmeric. And that has curcumin, and curcumin also helps with autophagy. So those three together, it doesn't have the fructooligosaccharides. It has some fiber from the chlorella, and it has some naturally occurring vitamins like vitamin D and K, iron, a little bit of iron too. But that's why that product was formulated specifically for autoimmune patients like me.
Fantastic. I will put a link in the description box below for where people can get your products. And thank you very much for the discount code you have also kindly offered. Now, before we wrap up, Leslie, thank you so much for all this information. We can unwrap this, but I think we need a few days or weeks to go into details for all of these. But as you know, and as my listeners know, my clinic in London, our main work is on aesthetics and beauty. So I'd like to know how Spermidine can help with nails, hair, skin prior to aesthetic treatments or after aesthetic treatments, or in general for skin health without any aesthetic treatments?
So that's a great question. And it's the first thing that people notice. So I don't know for those people who can see me. So I'm 59. I don't have to dye my hair. I think it's reasonably thick for somebody who's 59. You've met me in
Your hair is
person, Dr.
beautiful.
Sophie. So you can vouch for this.
Your hair is
You
beautiful.
know, and you can see my skin. Of course, it probably does help that I'm half Asian, but I'm, half Irish, German as well. So I don't get any points there. And what I will say is that we know spermidine. Sorry?
Can I say why you're saying that? I'm not sure everybody knows. Studies have actually shown that Asians age 10 years later than their Caucasian counterparts. And that's why Leslie's saying, talking about her Asian heritage. So yes, you have some lucky genes.
I have some lucky genes there. Yes, exactly. But what we do know from spermidine, and I will say, my father passed away at age 39. My mother went gray at age 50. So, people often say, oh, it must be genetic. Yes, you're Asian. And I say, okay, well, yes, I am. But my mother went gray at 50. And so I'm 9 years on and I still don't have to dye my hair, which I'm hoping I won't have to because I'm so lazy, But what we do know about spermidine is that it increases keratin and keratinocytes. And keratin is needed for nails and it's also needed for hair. Right. But the other thing is that it helps put the hair follicle back in the growth phase. So a lot of people say, oh, I notice all of these new baby hairs up at the temples. So in Asia, and I know you're a professor at the famous Jiaotong University in Shanghai.
Visiting associate professor.
Visiting, okay. But you've been there and you know that in Asia, before we had all these blood tests, doctors actually looked at their patients and they looked for clinical symptoms. And in East Asia, one of the things they look for hairs, these baby hairs at the temples, and they're looking for growth. So if we ever see a little, a child, and look at babies, you can see the little baby hairs everywhere. And even with 13-year-olds, 18-year-olds, you can see that hair is still there. That is a sign of high spermidine content. It is an outward sign of it. And it is something the East Asian doctors look for when they're looking for health. Now, clients tell us that they get that hair growth back and that what they notice is that it comes back in their original hair color, whether that's blonde or brown or red, it comes back in that original color. So I've got a photo here of the person was 79 at the time. I don't know if you can see, is a woman and she didn't want to be identified, but she has dark hair at the root and white hair at the edges.
Right.
And she was writing to us. This was after about 5 or 6 months of taking our product. And she said, I thought she would be thrilled. And she was actually unhappy because she said she doesn't want her friends to think she's vain and she's dyeing her hair. She's British.
Oh.
So if she had been American, she would have been happy, I think.
I think this is a very important point to take note of. Self-care and self-love is not vanity. And I think we've mistaken this word for way too long. Taking care of ourselves, taking time out to relax, to rejuvenate, to recuperate is self-care, and that's not selfish, that's not vain. We need to have enough battery and power in ourselves to be able to help others. But we've forgotten about that. So thank you for pointing that out.
Thank you. Yes, exactly.
Mhm.
Entirely true. And another thing that spermidine does is we know from studies out of Korea that there is a skin microbiome, and that the microbiome on the skin also produces spermidine. And that spermidine increases the upregulation of collagen and elastin in the skin. Finally, the other thing that we know is that it helps in animal models. We can see that it helps speed up wound healing. And a number of our clients say, yes, they've noticed that if they get a cut, it heals up faster.
Interesting. Makes sense. Makes perfect sense though. Yes.
Same for the mucosa inside the mouth. So we have a dentist in Silicon Valley, Dr. Mark Burhenna, who uses it with his patients to help heal up their, when they've had dental surgery. So he has them take it to heal that up. And he says he can see on the x-rays, the patients that actually take the trouble to take Spermidine, that their wound healing is better, but actually their bone formation is better too on the x-rays. And then one report that we've had is how it helps with PRP. So having probably done many platelet-rich plasma treatments, that when you spin out someone's plasma, you can visually see if it's clear or it's not. Is that right? And what our clients say is that when they go back for their PRP treatments, their doctors say, "What have you done? Your plasma looks great." And that's interesting because just on visual inspection, you can see the plasma has changed. And it's not just in humans. We've had it said because we've got people who give this to their dogs. And we had a client who had a French bulldog, so big eyes. And there's not much you can do as they get older. But one of the things you can do is platelet-rich plasma drops on the eye. And that dog had its plasma spun out. It was an elderly dog. And the vet said, "What are you giving to this dog? Its plasma looks great." So that is another example of how it helps. And the final way is with sleep. So we all know the term beauty sleep. And sleep is that time when we allow the body to rest and repair and renew. We know that spermidine impacts 2 of the 8 clock genes that modulate circadian rhythm. So a lot of women, as they go towards menopause, after menopause, they can't sleep so well.
Right.
This is probably due to lowered progesterone. And we get lots of reports of men and women sleeping better. We do also know that in addition to that modulation of the circadian rhythm, there was a study done in Canada in humans, in men and women, and they gave them food-derived spermidine and spermine. So this would be like Primidine original. And after only 30 days, their progesterone levels, estradiol, testosterone, DHEA, and pregnenolone normalized. So if that progesterone goes up, you're going to sleep better. You're going to deal with stress better. But you get that beauty sleep that will help with hair, skin, and nails as well.
Wonderful. So how long before any cosmetic treatments or surgery, and how long after do you recommend for people to take
if they could, because each of us is different, and imagine your body as having a kind of kitchen cupboard full of, we hope, spermidine. But if you've been fighting, say, COVID or some other virus, or you've just had a baby, those kitchen cupboard stores are low. You need to top up, and you need to get them where they are optimal. And so it will be different for every single person. But if I had to generalize, I would say take it 3 months before a big treatment, 1 month at least, but 3 months would be optimal. Assuming you're healthy and you've not just had a heart attack or you've not just delivered a baby or something. And once you notice that you have to trim your nails faster than usual, then you know it's working. Or if you notice your eyelashes have grown longer or your eyebrows have filled back in, these are signs that it's working and that you're topping up your internal needs, because the body will only allow it to go to frivolous things like eyelashes and eyebrows and nails once you have topped up for more important organs like the heart, the liver, the brain.
Leslie, thank you so much for your time. This was incredible. And I am very, very impressed by the amount of knowledge, research, and scientific data that's out there. And for everything that you have done, because you're the pioneer in this field and in supplementation of spermidine. Am I right?
We were the first into the United States. And yes, certainly the work done at the University of Oxford is pioneering when it comes to the immune system.
Amazing. I think we should do another session together. But for today, any final thoughts?
Get it from your food first if you can. This is something we always take for granted, but the quality and the provenance of the food you are eating, it matters. And see it as a gift for yourself. It's food is medicine. It is. We have to go back to first principles and never forget about the little pharmacy that resides in your gut biome. It's an asset, it's something that you might not have known existed, but it's there for your benefit. If you take care of it, it will take care of you. So remember to feed it fiber.
Thank you very much, Leslie. Thank you for your time. And any questions anybody has, I will link Leslie's details in the description below and my details, and would be happy to take any questions you may have. Thank you so much, Leslie, for your time today.
Thank you so much, DrSouphi, for having me. It's been a real privilege and honor with someone of your stature.
Honor is all mine. Thank you so much. And I look forward to our future conversations, and you're a true inspiration. Thank you very much, Leslie. Speak to you soon again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.